I'm your host, Mr. MegaManFan, and on today's episode of Genesis Does, I can with 100% certainty guarantee you that Genesis not only does what Nintendo don't, but that Nintendo would not want to and Nintendo should never do. This is Elf War, or it's Super Magician, or it's Ling Wan Dao Shi, or it's Revenge of Fu Manchu, or it's Reagan Doshi, or it's Revenge of Fu Manchu from the Dead. There are so many different titles to this game out there, which should indicate to you that this is an unlicensed bootleg game. And you would be correct about that, although it got a quasi-official release in the territory of Taiwan, thanks to the developer GamTech. Not to be confused with GameTech, the people that make video game accessories and peripherals. No, this is GamTech, the makers of what we would refer to as shovelware if it was on the Nintendo Wii. But they never got any further than the Game Boy Advance, so they came in just before they could have really pumped out a lot of cheap crap and sold it to millions upon millions of people. There aren't really many games that they're known for because, of course, they're bootleg games, and oftentimes they didn't even take credit for the games they developed. They worked as a shadow developer behind the scene, like a crappier version of Toze without even having the Game & Watch Gallery or the legendary Starfy to their credit. They may have one game that you would actually know of, Legend of Wukong. Other than that, nothing. Well, nothing and this abomination of a game, which some people have politely tried to compare to Zombies Ate My Neighbors. No, it's not that. It's not even in that league. First of all, look at how choppy and terrible the scrolling is. Second of all, look at the fact that your hero character randomly speeds up and slows down in his walk cycle. I can't tell if that's because there are too many sprites on the screen at one time and the Genesis can't handle them all, or if the game is just poorly optimized, poorly coded, poorly executed in every conceivable way. I would say the latter because, honestly, when the enemies disappear before your shots even hit them, that either says their hitboxes are too large or their programming is just terrible. There is a decided lack of sound effects, save for a small poof when you hit something and it vanishes, which, fine, okay, whatever, but it hardly lights the world on fire when you have to listen to this repetitive loop of bad music over and over again. And sometimes you get awarded points for picking up items, and sometimes you don't. And sometimes it's clear what your objective is, and other times you're picking up an entire hot tub with a girl inside it. Yeah, what now? I guess you're supposed to rescue everyone, but there's a couple of problems with that. First of all, there are these little divots in the hedges that look like you can walk through them to get to other areas, but I've tried and I can't break through to any other areas where there might be additional people to rescue. Tried shooting at the walls, tried going through the walls, tried randomly finding new areas of wall. No, you cannot break through. There doesn't seem to be any way. Second problem is you have limited ammo, which is something I was not aware of until I ran out of it. And you just saw me die, but when you die, you don't get your ammo back. You have as many lives as you want. You can set it from 1 to 9 in the options, but you really shouldn't bother because if you run out of ammo, it doesn't matter how many extra lives you have. You're not getting any further than that. So my next thought was, maybe I can go into one of these buildings, one of these temples. That didn't work either. And then the enemies spawn endlessly. Even the ones you've killed come back and more take their place. It's kind of like Gauntlet in that they're endlessly coming at you, except at least in Gauntlet you can find the source they're coming out of and shoot it to destroy it. You have no such ability here. Well, you wouldn't any with no ammo, but You definitely don't either way. You can't stop them from coming. So you're going to die, and you're going to turn into a pile of bones. And that might be the only amusing thing about this game is the death animation cycle. Watching your body crumble into a heap is the only reward you get for playing this terrible game. Oh, Elf War, Elf War, Elf War. You could have been something, but you're not anything. There's like 2 frames of animation for each of these monsters. They jiggle around and stutter uncontrollably, and it's very nauseating if you stare at any one part of the screen for too long, given the way it jumps up and down at you. I don't know why this exists or why it needed to exist. Gamtech did not put forward their best effort here. I'm not sure if Legend of Wukong can be called their best effort, but as Genesis titles go, it might be. It certainly is compared to this. And Lord knows this should never have been released outside of Taiwan, let alone anywhere else. If you have the means to play it on a analog Mega SG or a Sega Genesis using some sort of EverDrive product, maybe you want to try it, but you will tire of it quickly. I tired of it after 8 minutes, especially with no ammo and basically unlimited lives. According to the cutting room floor, you can use passwords to progress further in the game, but if the rest of the game is like this, I really wouldn't want to, and I can't imagine anybody would. They even offer a special hex code that you can edit into the game to use a 17th password to get to level 17 of the game that the game normally does not recognize. That's telling. 17 levels, 17 passwords, and the game won't even recognize the 17th one unless you force it to. Now that to me screams badly coded video game that should not exist. Perhaps the title Revenge of Fu Manchu from the Dead was the most accurate title of all, because it feels like someone is getting revenge on you for wanting to play a Genesis game. Like, you thought you were going to have some fun? No, taste the evil dead from Fu Manchu instead. We are here to ruin your life and make your week miserable and make your year horrible and make your entire century awful. We are the Revenge of Fu Manchu from the Dead. Beware our wrath. Beware our shitty scrolling graphics. Beware our unplayable game. Beware our lack of ammo and our obtuse objectives that you will never solve. Ha 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 ha! We are Revenge of Fu Manchu from the Dead, and you will regret the day that you ever put this in an emulator. It is bad. It is just bad. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and welcome back to Genesis Does. Today, we're looking at putter golf. Don't bother trying to find a physical cartridge, there isn't one. This game was originally part of the Sega Game Toshikan, or Sega Game Library, if you translate that to English, a Mega Drive cartridge that came with the Mega Modem in 1990. We've talked on this show before about the Mega Modem and various ideas that were thought of to bring games from remote services into your home, including the Sega channel that eventually required a cable modem and a special adapter to download games to a physical cartridge and then erase them once you turned off your Genesis. So there were some games that were exclusive to these type of devices that never saw any other form of release. But this one, even though it didn't ever come out physically for the Mega Drive or Sega Genesis, there is another version of it that you can play. It's called Putt and Putter, and it's a Sega Game Gear game. You've undoubtedly seen it before if you've wandered around any retro gaming store and looked through their cheap bin of Sega Game Gear games. It's usually $2 or $3, very plentiful. Seems like a game a lot of people bought because they're like, hey, it's mini golf. I like mini golf. I'm sure my kid will like mini golf. This will be a fun way for them to play with their Game Gear. And to a certain degree, it is mini golf, I'll give it that. It is playable, I'll give it that. It's certainly not the best version of mini golf you can play. And in fact, I would go so far as to say it's a rather poor version of it. You don't get a lot of control over the ball, over the physics, over the playfield. It's very, very rudimentary, which you would expect on a Game Gear or the Sega modem given the file size and the slow bandwidth that they were using for that service, but, well, you can only forgive them for so much. To look at the entire playfield, you have to scroll 1 pixel square of your crosshairs at a time from one side of the screen to the other. There's no way to overview the entire course. Certainly no way to quickly do it. You can't speed from one side to the other. You have to tediously look at the whole course if you can't see where to shoot. And sometimes if you're impatient like I am, you'll just shoot blindly and hope for the best because you get tired of having to look at the whole course first before you do anything. It's an incredible pain. And the power meter is very unforgiving. It swings from low to high quickly, and there's no gauge on the distance that the power will provide. You don't have any way to measure how hard you're hitting it. You just have to guess which amount of power is enough for the shot you want to hit and go for it, which means more often than not, you're either going to underhit it or overhit it because there's no way to know. You just have to learn the hard way. Once you've hit it once too hard, you dial it back. Once you've hit it too softly and it doesn't go in the cup, you know to push it up a little bit. There's no excuse for this lack of finesse, and it's only compounded by the fact that it's very, very unforgiving, which I guess for a download game that's intended to be a miniature experience, maybe that's not so bad because you didn't pay the price for a full game, so they're trying to make it harder to milk the most gameplay out of a very small file. Fine, but in 2021, that's not holding water because there's no reason to take away balls every time you miss a shot and give you a game over if you're that many strokes over whatever they consider par to be. Their definition of par and the game's mechanics are totally out of whack. They do not correlate to each other. If you get to the second or third hole, consider yourself lucky because that means you've hit a couple of incredibly good shots, managed to pull off par or one over at best. At least it does reward you if you go under and give you a ball back, but again, this whole system just seems ludicrous to me. Why not just let you play every hole, no matter how far over or under you go, tally your score at the end, and then let you try to get a better score next time? That's what a standard miniature golf game would do. That's what you'd do playing miniature golf, period. You'd play every single hole, tally up your score, compare it to your friends, and then see who had the best score and try to do better the next round, knowing that you play the holes and you know the shots and you can take better shots than you did the last time and try to up your game. Or you could take a risky shot and try to get a hole in one, or you can play it safe and see if you can beat your average. Whatever. There's strategy to miniature golf, and this takes all the strategy out of it because it punishes you. It says, you suck, loser, start over again, you're not good enough, get good, it's miniature golf, dumbass, you're supposed to be better than that. Well, with these controls, you can't be better than that. Oh, it's a good thing this was a pack-in and a small download and everything else about it, because it's definitely not something you'd pay for this for if it was big and expansive, because if it was any more than what it is, it would be brutal. It's just barely acceptable at this level, and more than this would not be good. So I guess play Putt and Putter on the Game Gear if you're going to play this at all. The SegaNet version for Mega Drive is exclusive to Japan and, quite frankly, should stay that way. This is a curiosity for those who want to dig deep into the archives of Mega Drive and Genesis history. You want to learn more about obscure games that never showed up anywhere else? Fine. Then fire it up in emulation and give it a spin like I'm doing here. I don't think you need to go much beyond that. I wouldn't put it on a micro SD card and put it in an analog Mega Drive. I certainly wouldn't put it on one of those Mega Drive Pro cartridges or one of the variants that Terra Onion makes that does the same thing. Why would you waste the space that could be used for CD games, even though a lot of Sega CD games are QuickTime events with full motion video and not really so much playable experiences as just advance to the next video by pressing the right button in time. But even that could be more fun than playing putter golf, because at least you have to memorize the events and try to get them in the right order. It's like Dragon Slayer in that case, It's like you want to see all the videos, so you try to memorize it and do your best. But the best you can do with putter golf still isn't that good. If there was just even a way to see how your shot looks before you hit it, if it gave you some sort of preview, dotted lines so you could line up the angle of your shot, then it would be more tolerable that it penalizes you for going strokes over, because at least you tried to aim your shot in and you missed, but you can do better the next time. And you know what? I'm done with putter golf. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is Genesis Does, and today we are looking at TechnoCop. Last week I put out a request for viewers to suggest games I should be playing on the show, and this one was suggested by Steve Hoker. Thank you, Steve. This is a PC game that eventually got ported to Sega Genesis in 1990. It started out on the Amiga, the Amstrad CPC, the Apple II, the Atari ST, the Commodore 64, MS-DOS computers, and even the ZX Spectrum. So it had quite a life before it finally came to a console. There was also an NES version in development by Probe Software. It was going to be released by Tengen, but due to Tengen's ongoing legal problems with Nintendo, that version was ultimately scrapped, and very little of the assets in the development of it still exist to this day. Now, you start out with these driving sequences where you're just blasting down the road as fast as possible and shooting at anything that gets in your way. It doesn't really seem to matter what they are on. Motorcycles, cars, trucks, whatever. Just shoot them. Apparently, they're all bad guys, too. There are no civilians on this road because you don't get penalized for anything you shoot at. As a matter of fact, you might as well just spam the fire button and hope for the best, because if you try to shoot selectively, you end up getting bumper to bumper with the cars, and that doesn't do you much good. You might as well just blast away as fast as you can at everything you see. The game is not picky. The visuals are a little bit substandard here. Your car looks like a piece of cardboard moving back and forth across a road, and the road doesn't really have any texture either. It's just a slab of gray with white lines painted on it. It really feels like a port from an IBM PC game, because this is about the level of graphics I would have expected from a PC game when I was in my teenage years. There's no visual enhancement to this whatsoever. It's not even any illusion of parallax scrolling. You just have a range of mountains in the background and some fluffy white clouds just sitting there. Although calling them fluffy would be a stretch. They're more like squashed mushrooms. It's not a visually impressive game, that's what I'm saying. Then you have these side-scrolling missions, and some little kid is enthusiastically jumping up and down like, here, the bad guys are here. You have two different weapons. You have a gun and a net. What the point is of using one or the other, I have never figured out. We got some pseudo graffiti along the walls here, like thrash and DOA rules. Dead or Alive rules? Well, it's a little too early for that game. Or maybe they were cribbing from RoboCop. I mean, it is called TechnoCop, so perhaps Dead or Alive, you're coming with me. That's what they were going for. And then the laziest graffiti of all, somebody just sprayed punk on the wall. I kind of feel like TechnoCop is a punk every time he jumps. That sound he makes is absurd. For some reason, it reminds me of Dark Castle on Macintosh, and I wouldn't call that a favorable comparison. Allegedly, you're supposed to rescue a hostage here, but I've done this mission several different times, gone up and down the elevators, explored this entire area, and I've never been able to find this grandmother that's being held hostage. All I can ever find is a woman of ill repute sitting in a chair, not even tied up or anything, just sitting there looking at you. It's not even like you get a chance to explore and figure out what you missed because there's a timer and it runs down really, really fast. So you have to go back to your car and do another driving mission. Not that you really want to keep exploring this monotonous looking building with the same graffiti sprayed over and over again every few feet, the same cracks in the wall whether you're up or down, and these random items littered on the floor that sometimes you can crouch down and pick up and sometimes you can't. If it looks like a bag of money, you can probably pick it up. If it looks like a stereo, you can probably pick it up. If it looks like health or it looks like an item, you might not be able to pick it up. By the way, why are this guy's veins bulging in his arms so much? Is it because he's a TechnoCop, or is it because he's on more steroids than Scott Steiner and Macho Man combined? I have no idea. I don't even know what the premise of this game is supposed to be beyond you're shooting everything that you see. You're shooting everything on the road. You're shooting everything in the building. The world is full of bad guys, and there are no innocents here except the ones that you are directed to find by the mission statement you are given. And speaking of the gory content, here's an interesting little note from Wikipedia, and I quote, "Both Nintendo of America and Sega of America insisted upon previewing games made for their system prior to release to check for bugs and potentially controversial or offensive content. Sega allowed TechnoCop to be released without requiring Razorsoft to remove or tone down the game's violent content. Along with the blood, when the player character shot at another character, they would be blown apart." So why did Sega allow this? Because even I immediately noticed that that was kind of gory for a Sega Genesis game. I mean, this isn't Mortal Kombat, and you're not trying to decapitate people or remove their spines. So why they allowed that, I can't imagine. It doesn't offend me or anything, but if they had standards and they didn't adhere to their own standards, why even have standards at all? But it's possible that Sega didn't even know what they were doing at the time, because this same Wikipedia article claims it was, quote, one of the first third-party games ever on Genesis. And if that's literally true, that means it was before Electronic Arts, Accolade, Tengen, or anybody else, which seems odd to me. It feels like there would have been an EA game on Sega Genesis before this, but I could be wrong. So I looked up a list of Electronic Arts games developed between 1983 and 1999. I found Marble Madness, which came out on most home computers in 1986, but the Genesis version didn't come out till 1991. So I guess that would put it after TechnoCop. I kept looking though, was still convinced there had to be some Electronic Arts game before this, and Zany Golf might fit the bill. It's listed as coming out in 1988. I didn't think that TechnoCop or Razorsoft were the very first third-party game. I'm not even saying Zany Golf is the first third-party game. I was like, damn it, I knew there was an Electronic Arts game on Genesis before that, because I've got a whole slew of Electronic Arts games with those weird little yellow plastic tabs in them. So if you collect Sega Genesis games for any amount of time, you're going to end up with a bunch of them too, especially loose, because you'll get a lot of Electronic Arts sports titles that are not boxed, no manual, and they don't even look like Genesis carts at first, because you're thinking that a Genesis cart should be wide and flat, and these are tall and square and have a little yellow plastic tab in them. Never even understood what the purpose of that yellow plastic tab is. Was it just so you could grip onto it when you pull it out of the cartridge port? Because other than that, I don't know. I never needed a plastic tab to pull a regular Genesis card out. You just grab and pull. It's not like they're stuck in there with glue. Anyway, I believe Steve Hoker told me that he was a fan of this game because the music reminded him of a WWF entrance song. And honestly, the music might be the best part of this game because once you get beyond that opening sequence, everything starts to suck. Graphics are repetitive. The action, if you want to call it that, is repetitive. The sound effects are annoying. Even the limited amount of appeal of seeing somebody explode in a pile of gory chunks gets old after you shoot the first bad guy, because then you're seeing the same animation over and over again. So if it was amusing or shocking the very first time it happened, it loses that appeal immediately. There's really not much to recommend about TechnoCop. It's a basic Genesis game. It's far from the worst I've ever played. It's not Awesome Possum kicks Dr. Machino's butt. Or is it Dr. Makino's butt? I always forget. All I know is I never want to hear that guy say, "I'm awesome," ever again. Nor do I want to hear the sound that TechnoCop makes when he jumps over holes in the floor. Nor the pseudo-Wilhelm scream that he makes every time he gets injured by a bad guy. Ah! 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 No, just there's not much to recommend about TechnoCop, and it's not even a cheap game. It's $9.99 loose and $35 complete. So I don't own a copy of TechnoCop, and I'm not looking to own a copy of TechnoCop. I fired this one up in emulation because of Steve Hoker's recommendation, and now that I've played it, I can safely say this is not a game that you need to own. I'm Mr. MegaManFan, and as always, thank you for watching.